The text notification from American Express came through at 2:14 p.m., alerting me to a potential fraud attempt of $65,000 at a Lexus dealership. But the real fraud wasn't the purchase. It was the older woman laughing and pointing at the red convertible, her arm linked affectionately with a girl who was sleeping with my husband. The text notification from American Express came through at 2:14 p.m., alerting me to a potential fraud attempt of $65,000 at a Lexus dealership on the north side of town. My phone buzzed against the polished mahogany of the conference table, a jarring vibration in the silent room. But the real shock wasn't the number. It was the supplementary cardholder's name attached to the transaction. Joyce Miller, my mother-in-law. I apologized to my clients, excused myself from the meeting that was supposed to secure my architectural firm's budget for the next quarter, and walked out into the humid Chicago afternoon. My hands weren't shaking. That was the strange part. When adrenaline hits, people usually tremble, but I felt a terrifying glacial calm settle over me. Joyce didn't drive. She hadn't driven since her cataract surgery 3 years ago. There was no logical reason for her to be at a luxury dealership, let alone attempting to swipe a card I gave her for emergencies and prescriptions. I drove the 15 minutes to the dealership, parking my modest SUV across the street in a strip mall lot. I didn't need binoculars. The dealership was encased in floor-to-ceiling glass, designed to showcase the machinery, but today it was showcasing the betrayal of my life. There she was, Joyce. She was wearing the cashmere coat I had bought her for Christmas, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, looking every bit the matriarch of high society. But she wasn't alone. Standing next to her was a woman I had seen only once before, in a tagged photo on a mutual friend's social media feed that had been quickly deleted. Chloe. She was young, perhaps 24, with the kind of effortless, terrifying beauty that makes older women check their reflections in shop windows. She wasn't just standing near my mother-in-law. She was leaning into her. They were laughing. Joyce was pointing at a cherry-red convertible, beaming with a pride I had never seen her direct toward me. Not when I paid her rent, not when I funded her hip surgery, and certainly not when I married her son. I watched as the salesman walked back to them, looking apologetic. He handed the card back to Joyce. The decline. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The narrative I had told myself for months, that Mark was struggling with a midlife crisis, that he was distant because of work stress, evaporated. This wasn't just Mark cheating. This was a conspiracy. My husband was sleeping with this girl, and his mother was helping him celebrate it. They were building a new life, a new family unit, funded entirely by my long hours and sleepless nights. Joyce was picking out a car for the woman replacing me, using the credit limit I had worked 15 years to build. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on the back of my own card. Platinum Service, this is Sarah. How can I help you, Ms. Vance? Hi, Sarah, I said, my voice steady, sounding almost bored. I just received a fraud alert for the supplementary card ending in 4098. Yes, ma'am. We declined the transaction as it exceeded the typical spending pattern. Did you want to authorize a purchase of $65,000 at Northside Lexus? I watched through the windshield. Inside the glass box, Joyce was making a call. My husband's phone would be ringing right now. No, I said clearly. I did not authorize that. In fact, I need to report that card as stolen. I can cancel that immediately, Sarah said efficiently. Would you like to issue a replacement? No replacement, I replied. Actually, Sarah, I need to look at the entire account. How many authorized users are on my primary business and personal lines? You have your husband, Mark Miller, and his mother, Joyce Miller. Cancel them, I said. Cancel all of them. Mark's cards, Joyce's cards. Everything except the card currently in my hand. And Sarah? I need a freeze put on the joint checking account immediately due to suspicious activity. This will decline any recurring payments and cut off access immediately, Miss Vance. Are you sure? I watched Chloe pout, crossing her arms over her chest. I watched Joyce pat her arm consolingly, acting the part of the doting grandmother figure. They look so comfortable spending my money. They look so entitled to the sweat off my back. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," I whispered. "Shut it all down." "Done," Sarah confirmed. "Is there anything else?" "No, thank you. You've been very helpful." I hung up. Inside the dealership, Joyce looked at her phone in confusion. She tried to hand the card back to the salesman, insisting he try again. I could see the animated gestures, the indignation of a woman who had never been told no because she always had someone else to foot the bill. I put my car in gear. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. I simply pulled out of the parking lot and turned toward home. I had about an hour before Mark called me in a panic. I needed to pack his bags. The silence in the car was heavy, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like the calm before a necessary war. The humiliation inside the dealership was visible even from across the street. I didn't need to hear the words to understand the body language. Joyce was performing her signature move, the indignant stiffening of the spine, the aggressive waving of the hand that held the useless piece of plastic. She was likely demanding to speak to a manager, insisting that there was a mistake, that the bank was incompetent, that she was a VIP client. The salesman, previously obsequious, had shifted his stance. His arms were crossed, the smile was gone. He was looking at his watch. Beside her, Chloe had taken a step back. The girl wasn't supporting Joyce anymore. She was checking her phone, creating a physical distance between herself and the embarrassment occurring at the desk. It was a perfect snapshot of their dynamic, transactional. As soon as the transaction failed, the connection faltered. I didn't stay to watch them leave. I had seen enough to fuel the next few hours of my life. The drive home was a blur of autopilot maneuvering. My mind was operating on a different frequency, a cold, sharp wavelength where emotions were stored away in boxes, much like the ones I was about to fill. When I pulled into the driveway of the house, the colonial revival I had restored with my own hands, the mortgage paid from my firm's profits, it didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a set piece for a play that had run its course. I entered through the garage and went straight to the master bedroom. I didn't cry. Crying implies grief, and I wasn't grieving yet. I was strategizing. I pulled Mark's 2 largest suitcases from the back of the walk-in closet. They were Toomey leather, a birthday gift I had bought him last year for a business trip to Seattle, a trip I now suspected Chloe had been on as well. I packed with the efficiency of an architect, shirts folded perfectly, suits in garment bags, toiletries in their waterproof case. I didn't cut the crotch out of his trousers or bleach his favorite shirts. That's what women do in movies when they want attention. I didn't want attention. I wanted him gone. I wanted the erasure of his presence to be absolute. By packing him perfectly, I was sending a clearer message. I am not crazy. I am not hysterical. I am simply finished with you. By 5:30 p.m., his life was condensed into 3 bags sitting by the front door. The closet looked strangely balanced now, with only my clothes hanging in the space. It felt lighter. I went to the kitchen and opened the wine fridge. I bypassed the everyday Pinot Noir and reached for the bottle of 2012 Cabernet Sauvignon that Mark had been saving for a special occasion. I figured the destruction of his marriage was special enough. I poured a glass, filling it generous and deep red. I didn't turn on the lights. The autumn dusk was settling over Chicago, casting long gray shadows across the living room floor. I sat in the wingback chair facing the front door, the glass cool in my hand, and listened to the silence of the house. At 6:15 p.m., the headlights swept across the front window. My heart rate didn't spike. If anything, it slowed down. I heard the garage door rumble open, the heavy thud of his car door closing, and then the sound of the key in the lock. Mark walked in, loosening his tie. He looked the part of the exhausted provider perfectly. His shoulders were slumped, his brow furrowed. It was a performance I had bought into for years, the overworked husband carrying the weight of the world. Now, I knew the only weight he was carrying was the effort of maintaining 2 lives on my dime. He didn't see the bags at first. He was too busy looking at his phone, likely reading a frantic text from his mother about the bank error. "Elena?" he called out, his voice tinged with that fake weariness. "Why is it so dark in here? Honey?" He flipped the light switch. The foyer flooded with artificial yellow light, harsh and revealing. He blinked, his eyes adjusting. Then he saw me. I was sitting perfectly still in the armchair, legs crossed, the wine glass resting on my knee. I took a slow sip, watching him. "Hey," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Rough day? You didn't answer my text about dinner." He took a step forward, intending to lean in for a kiss, and that was when his foot bumped into the large black suitcase. He stopped. He looked down at the bag, then at the second one, then at the garment bag draped over the handle. He looked back up at me, the smile faltering, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. He honestly didn't think he'd been caught. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. "What's this?" he asked, a nervous chuckle escaping his throat. "Are we going on a trip?" "No, Mark," I said. My voice was soft, devoid of any warmth. It sounded like a stranger's voice. "You are." He frowned, dropping his briefcase on the floor next to his luggage. "I don't understand. Is this about the credit card thing? Mom just texted me. She said there's some glitch with the Amex. She's stuck at some restaurant. It's a whole mess. I told her I'd call you when I got home to sort it out." He was still lying. Even now, standing next to his packed life, he was lying. He thought he could technical support his way out of adultery. "It wasn't a glitch," I said, swirling the wine in the glass. "And she wasn't just at a restaurant, Mark. She was at the Lexus dealership on North Avenue." The color drained from his face so fast it was almost audible. His mouth opened, then closed. The tired husband mask cracked, revealing the panicked child underneath. And she wasn't alone. I continued, taking another sip. "I saw the car she picked out, red, very flashy. I assume that was for Chloe, because Joyce certainly can't drive it." Mark froze. The name hung in the air between us, a toxic vapor. He looked at the bags, then at the door, and finally at me. There was no denial he could construct fast enough. "Elena, wait," he started, raising his hands, palms out. "It's not what you think. Let me explain." "You don't need to explain," I said, setting the wine glass down on the side table with a sharp clink. "The bags are packed. The cards are canceled. The bank accounts are frozen. You can explain it to your mother when you pick her up. She's probably still waiting for someone to pay the bill." Mark was still stammering, his hands hovering uselessly in the air, when the sound of a car door slamming outside cut through his pathetic attempt at a defense. It wasn't a normal close. It was a slam born of pure, unadulterated rage. "That will be your mother," I said, staying seated. "You might want to let her in before she scratches the paint on the door." Mark scrambled to the entryway, looking like a man trapped between a firing squad and a cliff. He opened the heavy oak door, and Joyce swept in like a hurricane in a cashmere coat. She didn't look at Mark, she looked past him, her eyes locking onto me with a ferocity that would have intimidated the old Elena. But the old Elena was gone. "You!" Joyce shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at me. Her face was flushed, her lipstick slightly smudged from what I assumed was a stress-induced glass of wine. "Do you have any idea what you just did to me? I have never been so humiliated in my life. Standing there at the counter, with people watching, and the card declines. The salesman looked at me like I was a pauper." She marched into the living room, throwing her handbag onto the sofa, my sofa. "I called the bank, and they said you reported it stolen," she spat, her voice climbing an octave. "Are you out of your mind? I had to have Chloe pay for our lunch. A 24-year-old girl had to buy me a salad because you decided to play games with the accounts." Mark flinched. He reached out, grabbing Joyce's arm. "Mom, stop, shut up." "I will not shut up," she shook him off. "Elena needs to understand that she cannot use money to control this family. It is financial abuse, that's what it is. You missed a payment or hit a wrong button, and instead of fixing it, you froze everything? How dare you?" I watched them. It was fascinating, really. They were so accustomed to my compliance that they couldn't process my rebellion. They genuinely believed I was the villain for cutting off the supply line. "It wasn't a mistake, Joyce," I said calmly. "And I didn't freeze the account because of a missed payment. I froze it because I don't buy cars for my husband's mistresses." The room went silent. The air pressure seemed to drop. Joyce froze, her mouth slightly open. She looked at Mark, then back at me. The shock lasted only a second before the gaslighting mechanism kicked in. It was a survival instinct for them. "Mistress?" Joyce let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Elena. Is that what this is about? You're jealous of Chloe? She's Mark's intern. She's a child. We were looking at cars for the company fleet. You are so insecure, it's pathetic. You're seeing ghosts because you're always working and you've lost touch with reality." Mark latched onto this lifeline immediately. His posture straightened. "Exactly, Elle. Chloe is an assistant. Mom was helping her pick out a lease for the sales team. You've let your imagination run wild, and now you've embarrassed Mom and ruined my evening over some paranoid delusion." "You need therapy," Joyce added, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Truly, Elena. To cut off your family because you're feeling inadequate? It's sick. You owe me an apology, and you need to call the bank right now and fix this mess before I have a heart attack from the stress." They were good. I had to give them that. If I hadn't seen them with my own eyes, if I hadn't seen the intimacy of their body language, I might have faltered. I might have questioned myself. They were weaving a reality where I was the crazy, jealous wife, and they were the innocent victims of my neurosis. I stood up slowly. The movement was enough to make Mark take a step back. I reached into the pocket of my blazer and pulled out my phone. "The company fleet," I repeated, my voice flat. "Is that what we're calling it?" I unlocked the phone and tapped the screen, turning it around to face them. The photo was high resolution. I had zoomed in with the new lens I bought for site inspections. It showed Mark's hand resting on the small of Chloe's back, intimately low. It showed Joyce beaming at them, but the kicker was the second photo. It was from 30 minutes prior, captured through the glass of the cafe next door where they had met before the dealership. Mark was kissing Chloe. Not a friendly peck, a deep, lingering kiss, while Joyce sat across from them, eating a croissant and reading a menu. I swiped to the next image. Joyce holding Chloe's hand, laughing. I tossed the phone onto the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud, sliding to a stop near Mark's knees. "You were there, Joyce," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "You watched your son cheat on his wife, and you didn't just tolerate it. You catered it. You were helping him buy her a $65,000 car with my money." Mark stared at the phone. He looked like he was going to be sick. The intern defense had evaporated. The company fleet lie was dead on the floor. Joyce's face turned a mottled shade of purple. The indignation vanished, replaced by the cornered look of a rat. Mark started, his voice cracking. "Elena, it's complicated. You've been so distant. I was lonely." "Don't," I cut him off. "Do not blame me for your lack of character." I turned my gaze to Joyce. "And you, I paid for your hip replacement. I paid for your condo fees. I treated you like my own mother. And you sat there and ate lunch with the woman destroying my marriage." Joyce straightened her coat, trying to regain some shred of dignity, but it was gone. "Well," she sniffed, her voice trembling but still defiant. "If you had been a better wife, he wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere. A man has needs, Elena. You're always at that office." It was the final nail. She had just admitted it. "Get out," I said. "This is my son's house," Joyce screamed, the mask falling away completely to reveal the venom underneath. "Actually," I said, walking to the front door and holding it open to the cold night air. "My name is on the deed, my name is on the mortgage, and my name is on the bank accounts you both love so much. Mark, take your bags. Joyce, take your son. You deserve each other." Mark looked at me, realizing for the first time that this wasn't a fight. This was an eviction. "Elena, please," he whispered, looking at the luggage. "Where are we supposed to go?" "I hear Chloe has a lease," I said. "Maybe she can drive you." When the front door finally clicked shut, sealing out the damp Chicago night and the two people I had spent the last decade prioritizing. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, vibrating with the echoes of their accusations. Joyce's shrill voice claiming financial abuse and Mark's pathetic deflection about loneliness hung in the foyer like stale smoke. I locked the deadbolt. Then I engaged the security alarm. It was a symbolic gesture as much as a practical one. They still had keys, of course, but the code would be changed by morning. I didn't go to bed. I went to my home office, a converted sunroom at the back of the house with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark garden. This was the room where I had built my life. This was where I had spent countless nights drafting blueprints, calculating load-bearing walls, and negotiating contracts while Mark was out networking. I sat down at my desk and woke up my computer. The dual monitors glowed to life, bathing the room in a cool blue light. It was time for the forensic phase of the evening. I logged into our primary banking portal. The interface was familiar, a digital map of my labor. I navigated to the Recurring Transfers tab. First on the list, Oakwood Terrace Management, Joyce's condo fees. I had started paying them 5 years ago when her husband passed away and left her with nothing but debt and a closet full of designer coats. Mark had cried, begging me to help her, saying it would only be for a few months until the estate settled. The estate never settled because there was no estate. The few months turned into 5 years, $2,400 a month. I hovered the mouse over the trash can icon. "Are you sure you want to cancel this recurring payment?" the screen asked. I thought about Joyce laughing at the dealership, pointing at the red convertible. I thought about her calling me insecure while eating a meal bought with my credit card. Yes, I clicked. Next was Miller Consulting, LLC. This was the hardest pill to swallow. Mark called himself a consultant. He had business cards, a website, and an office in a trendy co-working space downtown. But looking at the transaction history now, stripped of the emotional blinders of a supportive wife, the truth was glaring. Transfer from Elena Vance, $4,500. Operating costs. Transfer from Elena Vance, $3,000. Marketing budget. There was no income. For 3 years, there had been 0 significant deposits into his business account that didn't originate from my earnings. I wasn't supporting a startup. I was subsidizing a hobby. I was funding a playpen where he could pretend to be a CEO while actually using the marketing budget to take Chloe to lunch. I clicked on his business account details. The expense report for the last month was a roadmap of his affair. The Palmer House Hilton, $340. Sushi-san, $180. Uber Black, $65. I felt a wave of nausea, not from heartbreak, but from the sheer stupidity of my own blindness. I had been so busy building the empire that I hadn't noticed the termites eating the foundation. I remembered the early days, right after we got married. I was working 18-hour days at a firm that didn't respect me, eating instant noodles at my drafting table, while Mark was brainstorming at bars. He always had the next big idea, the next venture that was going to make us millions. "You're the talent, babe," he used to tell me, massaging my shoulders while I squinted at AutoCAD screens at 2 a.m. "I'm the vision. We're a team." We weren't a team. I was the engine, and he was the passenger complaining about the speed. I canceled the transfer to Miller Consulting. Then I went further. I contacted the leasing agent for his co-working space, a contact I had personally guaranteed because Mark's credit score was mediocre. I drafted a quick email. "Effective immediately. I'm withdrawing as the guarantor for the lease of Suite 402. Please direct all future billing inquiries to Mr. Miller solely." My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Mark. "My Uber app isn't working. It says payment method invalid. We're stuck on the sidewalk, L. Be reasonable. Mom is freezing." I stared at the message. He still didn't get it. He thought this was a timeout. He thought I was just mad, and that eventually I would turn the faucet back on because that's what I always did. I fixed things. I smoothed things over. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the spreadsheet listing our assets. The house? Purchased before the marriage, refinanced in my name only to get a better rate. The car he drove? A lease in my company's name. The retirement accounts? Separate. Mark had nothing. He had walked out of this house with 3 suitcases of clothes and a mother who expected to be kept in luxury. He was about to find out that without me, he wasn't a consultant or a visionary. He was just a 40-year-old man with no job, no credit, and a girlfriend who likely had no interest in supporting a broke divorcee and his high-maintenance mother. I closed the browser windows one by one. With every click, I felt lighter. The anger was fading, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't just saving my money, I was reclaiming my dignity. I finally picked up the phone and typed a single reply to Mark: walk. Then I blocked his number for the night, turned off the office lights, and walked upstairs to a bed that was finally, peacefully, mine alone. It took exactly 48 hours for the reality of Mark's new existence to set in. I spent those 2 days moving with the precision of a surgeon. I met with David, my attorney, a man who had handled my firm's contracts for years. He didn't offer pity, he offered a strategy. We drafted the petition for dissolution of marriage, citing irreconcilable differences, though we both knew the real difference was that I had a spine, and Mark had a parasite where his conscience should be. On Wednesday morning, I drove downtown to the Collective, the trendy co-working space where Mark played CEO. It was a beautiful building, all exposed brick and reclaimed wood, filled with ambitious startups and freelancers. Mark loved it there. He loved the espresso bar, the ping-pong table, and the illusion of productivity it provided. I walked into the lobby, the heavy manila envelope tucked under my arm. My heels clicked sharply on the polished concrete floor. I didn't have to look far to find him. Mark was standing at the front desk, leaning over the counter, using his most charming smile on the receptionist, a young woman named Jessica. He looked slightly disheveled. His suit was the same one he had worn the night I kicked him out, charcoal gray, now looking a bit wrinkled at the elbows. Beside him stood Chloe. The dynamic had shifted visibly. 2 days ago, at the dealership, they were co-conspirators, touching and laughing. Now, Chloe was standing 3 feet away, scrolling through her phone with an expression of intense boredom. She wasn't leaning in, she was checking the time. "I'm telling you, Jess, it's just a glitch with the autopay," Mark was saying, his voice a little too loud, a little too desperate. "If you just let me up to my suite, I can log in and update the card info. I have a client call in 10 minutes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller," Jessica said, looking uncomfortable. "The system locks the key cards automatically when the guarantor cancels the contract. I can't override it." "The guarantor?" Chloe looked up from her phone, her eyebrows narrowing. "I thought you owned the lease." Mark flinched. "I do. I mean, it's a corporate structure thing. Complicated." "It's not complicated at all," I said, announcing my presence. Mark spun around. When he saw me, a mix of relief and terror washed over his face. He actually took a step toward me, as if I were there to rescue him. "Elena, thank God," he said, forcing a laugh. "There's been a huge misunderstanding. Jess here says the account was canceled. Just give her the new Amex so we can get upstairs. Chloe and I have a strategy meeting." I looked at him, then at Chloe. Up close, without the anger blinding me, I saw her clearly. She was pretty, yes, but she looked tired, and right now she looked confused. "There is no new Amex, Mark," I said, my voice carrying through the quiet lobby. "And there is no strategy meeting, not on my dime." I stepped forward and extended the envelope. "You've been served." Mark didn't take it, so I set it on the reception counter between us. "Divorce papers. David fast-tracked them. You have 30 days to respond, but I suggest you get a lawyer sooner rather than later. And a job." "Divorce?" Mark hissed, glancing around to see if anyone was watching. "Elena, don't do this here. Let's go get coffee. Let's talk about this like adults." "We are done talking," I replied. I turned my attention to Chloe. She was staring at me, her eyes wide. "You must be the intern," I said pleasantly. Chloe stiffened. "I'm the vice president of marketing." I couldn't help it. A short, dry laugh escaped my lips. Marketing for what, exactly? Mark hasn't signed a paying client in 3 years. Did he tell you he was wealthy? Did he tell you he was an entrepreneur? Elena, stop! Mark lunged forward, trying to grab my arm, but the security guard near the elevators stepped in, blocking him. I didn't flinch. I held Chloe's gaze. He's broke, honey. The car you were looking at? I was paying for it. This office? I paid the rent. The dinners, the hotels, the company trips? All paid for by the wife he told you didn't understand him. He has 0 assets. He has a mountain of credit card debt and a mother who needs expensive medication. If you stay with him, that's what you're signing up for. Chloe looked at Mark. The adoration was gone, replaced by the cold calculation of someone realizing they had bet on a losing horse. Mark, she said, her voice sharp. You said the funds were tied up in escrow. You said the car was a company write-off. It is. It will be, Mark stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. She's just bitter, Chloe. She's trying to sabotage me. Once the IPO hits. There is no IPO, I said, finalizing the demolition. There isn't even a product. I looked back at Jessica, the receptionist. I'm sorry for the disturbance, Jessica. Mr. Miller won't be renewing his lease. Please remove his personal effects from the suite and leave them at the front desk for him to collect. Of course, Ms. Vance, Jessica said, avoiding Mark's eyes. I turned to leave. I didn't look back, but I heard the fallout. I heard Chloe's voice, shrill and angry. You lied to me? You made me pay for the hotel last night. Babe, listen. Don't babe me. Lose my number. The sound of heels clicking away rapidly in the opposite direction was the sweetest music I had heard in years. I walked out into the sunshine, the weight of the envelope gone, the weight of the marriage gone. I was alone, yes, but for the first time in a decade, I wasn't carrying dead weight. Now, only one loose end remained, Joyce. 3 days after I served Mark the divorce papers, my phone rang at 10 p.m. It was a time that used to signal an emergency, a fall, a sudden illness, a trip to the ER. Seeing the name Joyce on the screen triggered a phantom reflex of concern, a muscle memory honed over 5 years of caretaking. But I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again, and again. I finally picked up on the 4th ring, not out of worry, but out of a desire to silence the noise. I was sitting on my patio, wrapped in a blanket, watching the steam rise from a mug of herbal tea. The house was quiet, and I intended to keep it that way. Hello, Joyce, I said. Elena. Her voice was a ragged gasp, wet with tears. Oh, thank God. I thought you were dead. I thought something happened to you. Why haven't you called? Do you know what they did to me? I imagine the administration at Oakwood Terrace informed you that the automatic draft for your suite was declined, I said, keeping my voice level. They gave me a notice, Elena. A notice to vacate, she shrieked, the sound distortion sharp against my ear. They said I have 7 days. 7 days. I'm an old woman. I can't pack in 7 days. I have nowhere to go. Mark is staying at a motel by the highway. It's filthy. You can't expect me to go there. I don't expect anything from you, Joyce, I replied. You have a son. You have a family. I am no longer part of it. How can you say that? The tears vanished instantly, replaced by that familiar steely tone of accusation. I was like a mother to you. We spent Christmases together. I held your hand when you had that flu last year. Is this how you repay me? By throwing me on the street because you're having a spat with Mark? A spat? I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? Joyce, I saw you. I saw you at the dealership. I saw you laughing with the woman Mark was sleeping with. You weren't just a bystander. You were an active participant. You were helping him spend my money on his girlfriend. I didn't have a choice, she cried out. The pivot was instantaneous. He made me go. He said if I didn't come, he wouldn't visit me anymore. You know how Mark is. He can be so pushy. I was just trying to keep the peace. I didn't like her, Elena. She's vapid. She's nothing compared to you. I was just playing along for your sake, to keep an eye on him. It was a masterclass in revisionist history. If I hadn't seen the genuine affection in her eyes when she looked at Chloe, I might have hesitated. But I had the image burned into my retina. Joyce linking arms with the girl, looking at her with a pride she had never once shown me. "You weren't playing along, Joyce," I said softly. "You were betting. You thought Mark was going to trade me in for a younger model, and you wanted to make sure you were on the winning side. You thought the money came from him. You thought he was the golden goose." Silence stretched on the line. She knew I was right. She had miscalculated the economics of her own survival. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling again. "Elena, please, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Don't punish me for Mark's sins. I can't live in a motel. My hips, the stairs, please, just pay the rent for this month, just until I figure things out. We can talk. We can fix this." "There is nothing to fix," I said. "You made your choice at the Lexus dealership. You chose your family. You chose Mark and Chloe." "Chloe is gone," Joyce spat, the venom returning. "That little gold digger blocked Mark's number the second the credit card stopped working. She won't even answer my texts. She left us with nothing." "She didn't leave you with nothing, Joyce. She left you with exactly what you had before I came along," I said. "You have Mark. He's your son. You always said he was a genius, a visionary. I'm sure he'll figure out a way to take care of you. Maybe his consulting firm will finally take off." "He's useless," Joyce screamed, and the raw honesty of it was shocking. "He's a child, Elena. He can't take care of himself, let alone me. He's broke. You know he's broke. You can't leave me with him." It was the most truthful thing she had ever said. She knew exactly who her son was. She had known for years that he was a failure, a leech, and a liar. And yet, she had helped him betray the only person who had ever actually provided for them. She was willing to throw him under the bus now, just to save her own comfort. "I can," I said, "and I am." "Elena, wait." "Goodbye, Joyce." I hung up. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of severing a limb that had been gangrenous for years. I blocked the number. Then I blocked the facility's number, just in case they tried to guilt-trip me on her behalf. I looked out at the dark yard. A sense of profound sadness washed over me, not for the loss of the relationship, but for the realization that it had never really existed. I had bought a mother's love with monthly checks and premium health care. As soon as the payment failed, the love bounced. I finished my tea. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. Tomorrow, I had a meeting with the forensic accountant. We were going to dig through the last 5 years of financial records. I had a feeling the car at the dealership wasn't the first time Joyce and Mark had treated themselves to my hard work. The phone screen remained dark. The silence in the garden was no longer empty. It was peaceful. The mediation room smelled of stale coffee and lemon polish, a sterile purgatory where marriages went to die. We sat on opposite sides of a long boat-shaped table. On my side, there was order, a neat stack of files, a laptop, and David, my attorney, who looked as sharp as the crease in his suit trousers. On the other side sat Mark and a lawyer he had likely found on a billboard near the highway. A man with an ill-fitting jacket and a nervous tic in his left eye. Mark looked terrible. It had been 3 weeks since I kicked him out. His tan had faded into a sallow gray, and he had lost weight. But the arrogance was still there, lurking behind his eyes, fueled by the delusion that he was the victim of a vindictive woman. "Mr. Miller is seeking spousal support in the amount of $8,000 a month for a period of 5 years. Mark's lawyer began, reading from a notepad that looked like it had been chewed on. Additionally, he is claiming an equitable interest in Vance Architecture, citing his role as a strategic consultant during the marriage. He believes 50% of the firm's valuation is fair." I didn't blink. I didn't laugh. I just looked at Mark. He refused to meet my gaze, staring instead at the water pitcher in the center of the table. David adjusted his glasses. He didn't look at Mark's lawyer. He looked at the mediator, a retired judge with a face carved from granite. "We are rejecting all requests for spousal support," David said calmly, "and we are counterclaiming for the immediate repayment of funds misappropriated from the marital estate." Misappropriated, Mark's lawyer sputtered. That's a strong word. Mark contributed to the household. He had expenses. We have completed the forensic accounting of the last 36 months, David continued, sliding a thick black binder across the table. It landed with a heavy thud, the sound of a gavel striking a block. If you will turn to tab 3. Mark reached for the binder, his hand shaking slightly. He flipped it open. What you are looking at, David explained, his voice devoid of emotion, is a detailed record of what the court calls dissipation of marital assets. In layman's terms, Mr. Miller, this is money you spent on purposes unrelated to the marriage. Specifically, on a Miss Chloe Sanders. Mark's face went white. Here we have hotel stays at the Four Seasons, totaling $12,000. Jewelry purchases from Tiffany's, totaling $8,000. Dinners, spa treatments, and airline tickets. The total dissipation comes to just over $45,000 in the last year alone. That was business networking, Mark croaked, though his voice lacked any conviction. There is no business, I spoke for the first time. My voice was quiet, filling the room. We subpoenaed the tax records for Miller Consulting. You reported zero income for 4 years. A business that makes no money and only spends money on one specific 24-year-old woman isn't a business, Mark. It's an affair. David flipped a page in his own copy of the binder. Furthermore, we have the matter of Joyce Miller. My Mark flinched at his mother's name. Elena Vance has paid over $150,000 in the last 5 years for your mother's housing and medical care, David said. While this was done voluntarily at the time, the discovery of the affair changes the nature of these assets. However, the real issue is the credit card debt. You opened 3 credit cards in Elena's name, adding yourself and your mother as authorized users without Elena's explicit consent for the limits incurred. You maxed them out. Another $60,000. The mediator looked over his reading glasses at Mark. Mr. Miller, is this true? Mark slumped in his chair. I intended to pay it back. I was waiting for a deal to close. There was no deal, I said. There never was. David closed his folder. Here is the offer, and it is the only one you will get. We will not pursue criminal charges for credit card fraud regarding the unauthorized limit increases. We will absorb the debt you created. In exchange, you will waive all rights to spousal support, you will waive all claims to the house, and you will sign a document acknowledging you have zero interest in Vance architecture. You walk away with your personal effects and your freedom. That's it. But the house? Mark whispered. I put work into that house. You mowed the lawn twice in 10 years, I countered. The equity in the house is roughly $200,000. The amount you stole, and yes, I'm calling it stealing, plus the debt you racked up, plus the money I wasted on your mother, exceeds your share of the equity. You owe me, Mark. But I'm willing to call it even just to never see your face again. Mark looked at his lawyer. The man shrugged, closing his notepad. It's a good deal, Mark. If we go to trial, the judge will see the dissipation of assets. You'll lose, and you'll end up paying her legal fees. Mark looked down at his hands. The reality was crushing him. He wasn't walking out of here a millionaire. He wasn't getting a monthly allowance to fund his next fantasy life. He was walking out with nothing but the suit on his back, and a mother who was currently blowing up his phone, demanding to know where they were going to live. Mark swallowed hard. I need a few thousand, just to get an apartment, first and last month's rent. I stood up, smoothing the front of my skirt. I picked up my purse. Ask Chloe, I said. Or better yet, sell that watch I bought you for our 5th anniversary. It should cover a deposit on a studio apartment. I walked toward the door. I didn't look back. I heard the pen scratch across the paper as I opened the door. It was the sound of my liberation. The ink was dry before I even reached the elevator. 6 months later, the Chicago winter had finally broken, giving way to a tentative, muddy spring. The air smelled of wet earth and possibility. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, a new vehicle, a sleek black sedan I had leased in my own name, paid for with the bonus from a massive contract my firm had landed in February. I was stopped at a red light on North Avenue. To my right was the Lexus dealership. The glass walls still gleamed in the sunlight. The rows of cars still sat like jewels in a display case. But looking at the place now, I didn't feel the sharp stab of betrayal that had nearly brought me to my knees half a year ago. I didn't see Joyce's phantom silhouette pointing at a red convertible. I just seen a building. I just saw glass and steel. The ghost was gone. The light turned green, and I drove past, leaving the scene of the crime in my rearview mirror without a second glance. David, my lawyer, had called me earlier that week with the final paperwork. The divorce decree was stamped, filed, and absolute. During the call, he had mentioned, in a tone of professional neutrality, that Mark had inquired about the possibility of retrieving a few boxes of books he had left in the attic. I told him they were donated to the library 3 months ago, David had said. Thank you, David, I had replied. I didn't need updates on Mark, but in a city like this, news travels. I knew where they were. They were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex near the airport, a noisy, transient place where the planes rattled the windows every 10 minutes. Mark was working in sales for a logistics company, a job that required him to be on the phone making cold calls for 10 hours a day. It was a far cry from the visionary consultant lifestyle he had enjoyed on my payroll. And Joyce was with him. The irony was almost poetic. Joyce, who had terrified her son into compliance and manipulated me into servitude, was now trapped in a small box with the very son she had enabled. There were no more hip surgeries at private clinics. There were no more dinners at steakhouses. There was just the two of them, bound together by their shared incompetence and the mutual resentment of people who have lost their host. I could imagine the arguments. I could imagine Joyce complaining about the noise, about the cheap carpet, about the lack of service, and Mark having no one else to blame but himself. They had wanted to be a family so badly, a team that kept secrets from me. Now, they were exactly that. They had each other, and they had absolutely nothing else. As for Chloe, she had vanished as quickly as the credit limit. The last I heard, she had transferred to a different firm in another state, likely looking for a new sponsor. She was a lesson Mark had to learn the hard way. Loyalty bought with money expires the moment the transaction is declined. I pulled into the parking lot of my office. The sign out front had been repainted. It used to say Vance and Associates, implying a partnership that never really existed. Now, it simply read Vance Architecture. Clean, bold, solitary. I walked inside, greeting my staff. The atmosphere was lighter. The tension that used to radiate off me, the stress of supporting a deadbeat husband and a demanding mother-in-law, had evaporated. My energy was no longer being siphoned off to fill a black hole of neediness. It was being poured back into my work, into my life, into me. I sat at my desk and opened the window, letting the fresh spring breeze circulate through the room. I thought about the $65,000. At the time, seeing that number on my phone screen felt like the end of the world. It felt like a catastrophe. But looking back, I realized it was the best money I never spent. That notification was a ransom note. It was the price of admission to the truth. If Joyce hadn't been so greedy, if Mark hadn't been so arrogant, I might have spent another 10 years sleepwalking through a marriage where I was nothing more than an ATM with a pulse. I had paid a high price for my freedom, legal fees, the heartache, the loss of the dream I thought I had. But as I looked at the blueprints spread out before me, detailing the foundation of a new library I was designing for the city, I knew the ledger was balanced. I had canceled their credit cards, yes, but more importantly, I had canceled their access to my soul. I picked up my pen, feeling the weight of it in my hand. It was steady. I was steady. The phone didn't ring with emergencies. The inbox wasn't full of fraud alerts. There was only the quiet, productive hum of a life that finally, completely, belonged to me. I began to draw.